This story is about a love so complicated, so unexpected, that it turned my entire life upside down. I thought I was happy. At 30 years old, I had a stable job, a good group of friends, and a girlfriend, Emma, who seemed to be the missing piece in my life. We had been together for 2 years, and while our relationship wasn't perfect, it was comfortable. I genuinely believed we were building something solid. Emma often talked about her mother, Grace. Widowed at a young age, Grace had raised Emma on her own and built a successful interior design business from scratch. Emma always spoke about Grace with pride, describing her as a strong, independent woman. But for me, Grace was just a name, until Emma's birthday dinner. Emma wanted me and her mother to meet, so she invited me to Grace's house for dinner. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when Grace opened the door, I froze. She wasn't just attractive, she was captivating. At 49, Grace exuded a confidence and poise that I had rarely seen. Her piercing green eyes, perfectly styled hair, and warm smile made an immediate impression. Dinner was lively and filled with conversation. I was struck by Grace's intelligence and quick wit. She asked thoughtful questions about my work, my hobbies, and my dreams, and she genuinely listened. By the end of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about her had awakened a part of me I hadn't known was dormant. At first, I dismissed it as a fleeting crush, the kind that happens when you meet someone impressive, but I couldn't deny the subtle tension in the air. When Grace looked at me, it felt as though she saw right through me. A few months later, Emma suggested they move in together. I agreed, thinking it was the next logical step in our relationship. Around the same time, Grace's home was undergoing renovations, and Emma invited her to stay with us for a few weeks. At first, I didn't think much of it. Grace was a considerate guest, always keeping to herself and helping around the house. But as the days turned into weeks, her presence began to feel less like that of a guest and more like that of a kindred spirit. Grace and I often crossed paths during the day, sharing casual conversations about books, travel, or current events. But it was in the small moments, when she smiled at a joke I made, or when our hands accidentally brushed while passing dishes, that I felt a pull I couldn't explain. One day, while Emma was out of town for work, me and Grace found ourselves alone in the kitchen. She was cooking, humming softly to herself, and I offered to help. As we stood side by side, our conversation grew more personal. Grace opened up about her late husband, her struggles as a single mother, and her fears of growing older. I listened intently, feeling an intimacy I hadn't experienced even with Emma. The turning point came one evening when Emma had to work late, leaving me and Grace alone in the house. Grace suggested we watch a movie together, and I agreed. We chose a classic romantic film, one that Grace said reminded her of her younger days. As the movie played, I became increasingly aware of how close we were sitting. Every laugh, every glance, every shared comment felt electric. When the movie ended, we sat in silence for a moment, the air between us thick with unspoken emotions. Grace broke the silence. "Jason," she said softly, "do you ever feel like life surprises you in ways you're not ready for?" Her words hung in the air. I didn't know how to respond, but I didn't have to. Grace leaned closer, her eyes searching mine. For a moment, we both froze, and then, without thinking, I leaned in and kissed her. The kiss lasted only a few seconds before Grace pulled away, her face a mix of shock and guilt. "We can't," she whispered. "This isn't right." I apologized, but the damage was done. From that moment on, our dynamic changed. We avoided each other during the day, but the tension was impossible to ignore. One night, unable to sleep, I went to the living room and found Grace sitting there, staring at the darkened TV screen. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with vulnerability. "I've been fighting this," she admitted, "but I can't deny what I feel anymore." We spent the night talking, sharing our fears, our doubts, and our undeniable connection. By morning, we both knew we couldn't go back to pretending. When Emma returned from her trip, she immediately sensed that something was off. I tried to act normal, but the guilt was eating me alive. Grace, on the other hand, seemed distant, avoiding eye contact with her daughter. The truth came out one evening when Emma caught me and Grace talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. Emma confronted us, demanding to know what was going on. When Grace confessed their feelings, Emma's reaction was explosive. "How could you?" she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "Both of you, how could you betray me like this?" I tried to explain, but Emma wouldn't listen. She packed her things and left, slamming the door behind her. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I felt like a villain, but I couldn't deny that what I felt for Grace was real. Grace, too, struggled with the fallout, but she stood by JME, insisting that we couldn't let others dictate our happiness. Over time, we built a life together, despite the judgment and whispers from those around us. Our love was unconventional, even scandalous, but it was ours. My story is a reminder that love doesn't always follow the rules. Sometimes, it finds you in the most unexpected places, challenging everything you thought you knew about yourself.